Well, this morning, Maryland Governor Wes Moore officially signed the state's budget into law. The nearly $71 billion budget does not increase taxes or fees for Marylanders, but there are parts of the budget that some state lawmakers are concerned about. So joining us now live this afternoon is Delegate Jesse Pippy. He represents Frederick County, which is Maryland's 4th district. Delegate, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And overall, let's just get your take. What is your feeling about the budget in your eyes? We could even just start with some of the successes here.
Well, look, I'll just say this. This is absolutely a election year budget. What you have is the governor and the majority party has managed to move funds around just enough to not have to raise taxes or fees in an election year. Last year, there was a $1.6 billion deficit. The majority party increased taxes, the largest amount in our state's history. This year, literally faced with almost the same deficit, another $1.5 billion. And what they did, instead of putting money in the rainy day fund, they took funds from there, they took funds from the CEF account, and they moved about $1 billion around to avoid having to say they raised taxes in an election year. But it really sets us up for big failure in the coming years.
Yeah, and you're talking about the budget shortfall and concerns that that could grow, Delegate. You know, in your eyes, what needs to be done to proactively address that shortfall?
Sure. I think the low-hanging fruit is adjusting the blueprint, which is the mandatory education spending. We've said this for a long time, the minority party, is that we were concerned about the unfunded mandate that is the Kirwan Commission or the blueprint spending. And what it does, it requires billions of dollars to be spent without a funding source. And so what we're projecting to see in the coming years is a multi-billion-dollar deficit, the likes we've never seen before. And by the way, there's really no plan to cover that deficit. And so we could be looking at massive tax increases, whether that's sales tax, income tax, and I don't think Marylanders are prepared for that.
So not now, but eventually something to see at some point. Delegate, there are some pretty significant investments in this budget, $100 million in utility fee relief. That is something that those in Maryland have been very outspoken about, those high utility bills, investment in law enforcement, community revitalization. What do you think about those investments? Do you consider those successes?
Well, listen, anytime there's an opportunity to provide some relief for Marylanders, I think that's a good thing. We wish it went further. I think the monthly relief that the majority party is projecting is about $12.50, which isn't very much when you consider the fact that their bills have generally increased hundreds of dollars per month. But certainly we want to find relief. Certainly we want to fund law enforcement. And certainly there's very important programs within the budget. You know, it's a $71 billion budget. The concerns we have is this is the largest budget that our state's ever seen in the 400 plus years. And the biggest concern is that we're really setting ourselves up for massive deficits in the coming years. And I just don't think that Marylanders are ready for that. I don't think they're ready for broad-based tax increases, income tax increases, sales tax increases. We need to make Maryland more affordable, and this just doesn't get it done.
And Delegate, this is the fastest the budget moved through the General Assembly in years. Do you think there should have been more debate?
You know, look, we have 90 days per the Constitution to pass a budget. It's disappointing that it seems like the budget is always kind of pushed toward the end. Yes, more time would be better, but, the Constitution's pretty clear. What we're hoping for is just a little bit more restraint. And like I said, I think the biggest relief that we can find in the coming years is probably related to the blueprint funding, which is the unfunded mandate that the majority party refuses to address. That's going to require us to spend, $3, $4, $5 billion that we just don't have. Marylanders cannot afford to write checks that we can't cash. And that's just really what this comes down to. There's some other mechanisms that would save us some money too about, the governor has spent all this time hiring new state employees, to the tune of $300 million. We could have, showed some restraint and not grown the size of state government as well, which would have saved taxpayers money. But there's a lot more to be desired.
Delegate Jesse Pippy, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us so we could hear your response to the budget signed today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Take care and stay with us. We'll be right back after this quick break.